Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Laurel Farrer, who is an internationally renowned thought leader on the topic of remote work. She's also the founder of Distribute Consulting. And for the past 15 years, Laurel has been unlocking the power of distributed workforces to create impact in corporations. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Did I get everything right?
I think so. I was impressed. So
before we jump in, I know I gave a little brief intro there, but you do so much more as well. So tell everyone a little bit more about your background and your journey to where we are now.
Yeah, well, I come from a background in operations. So I've been a COO of both hybrid and remote teams for, like you said, 15 years. And back then it was not as cool and as trendy as it is now. So that came with a lot of sacrifice and a lot of advocacy, just trying to help business leaders understand what a corporate strategy this can be and really helping them open up their minds to, I don't need to be in the office to be productive. I don't need to be in the office to be a valuable employee, nor do my teammates and colleagues. And so that was an evolution of several different businesses and work opportunities over a decade and a half. Well, I should say a decade, because about 5 years ago is when I was really hungry for organizational development resources specific to distributed work environments. I was looking for other people to learn from and to grow from. I felt like I had gone as far as I could have on my own, and it just didn't exist. There was a lot of information about managing people. There was a lot of information about self-managing yourself as a remote worker, but nothing about the organizational level. And so that's really when I became obsessed and said, we have to build this. This is the direction that the world is headed in. And we really need to understand how to develop very efficient and optimized organizations to leverage the power of remote work and to solve corporate problems and socio-economic problems like economic development and diversity and inclusion. And so that's what I've been doing ever since, advocating to governments and to organizations and helping them build programs and processes that really develop as a virtual organization.
Love that. Love that. It's always interesting when I speak to like an entrepreneur and where a passion then turns into a business, because you saw a gap. You were like, I need more knowledge on this. I've gone as far as I can. Let's see what other people are doing. You're like, wait a minute. I thought there'd be a lot, more of a wealth of knowledge out there. When did the passion turn into, I'm going to start my own business in this space and switch careers almost?
To be honest, it really is still evolving. I know that a lot of people are very fortunate to have that passion drive the foundation of a business. For me, it was very opposite. I felt very cornered into it. I was approaching Big Four consulting firms. I was approaching large organizations and large brands saying, please think about this. Like, do you want to be the thought leader on this topic? You're already headed in this direction. Let's just layer in that component of remote work and take you to the top. Like, I have no desire to start a company. I have no desire to start from scratch. I want to help somebody else do this. And they just wouldn't. I got laughed out of the room by brands like Google and LinkedIn and McKinsey. And so that's when I was like, okay, well, I guess if I want to do this, I know that this content needs to exist in the world. And so I guess I'm just going to have to do it myself. And so it was a bit of resentment at first of, this is hard. And I just want to, have the funding and stability of a real job with a secure company to be able to just enhance and add my expertise to it. But that's just not how it played out. So yeah, it's a bit bittersweet now to be on the other side of the pandemic, where these companies are now showcasing how remote friendly they are, or they are trying to sell remote consulting services without having any of that knowledge in-house. So yeah, it's complicated.
That happens more than you think, though, because that's exactly what happened to me. I worked in a company which were in the HR space, and a lot of the ideas that basically sum up what we do here at HR Leaders, I was pitching internally saying we should start a podcast, we should build these global communities of HR executives, and just everything that we do here for years. And I just got fed up. I was like, okay, I'm going to go and figure out how to do it myself. And
Yeah.
so when people think about, when they ask me, oh, what was the inspiration behind the company? They expect this sexy story and this inspirational story. And really it was like myself and Shane, my co-founder, were like, it got to the point where we're hearing what the customer wants, but our business is not willing to deliver what they need. And we were like, let's go out and do it. If we're hearing it from this many people, they can't be wrong. So we went and did it. So it's interesting that you say that. We've heard a lot about this topic, obviously, over the last year, but what's something, that the world needs to know about remote work that no one's really talking about?
The fact that the challenge is still ahead of us. So going remote and initially adopting remote work, unfortunately, is the easy part. Anybody can go remote pretty quickly and in a pinch, with minimal effects on the organization or on the workforce. It's still difficult, especially when it's in such an unexpected circumstance and it's adopted as a contingency plan, that there's no preparation that went into it. So obviously, yes, it's been a very, very hard year, but that is the easy part. The hard part is sustainability. So keeping a team remote is much, much harder than allowing a team to go remote. And that challenge, that hurdle, is still in front of us. Those pain points start showing up around month 12, month 18 and beyond. And so that is the phase that we're coming into right now. And it's going to be quite difficult. And in addition to that, hybrid teams are an even higher risk. It is so much easier to go fully remote or fully on site. Hybrid, historically, with case studies like IBM and Yahoo, they had horrible case studies of where their policies had to be retracted. There was massive discrimination and imbalance in employee experience, because hybrid is really, really difficult, because there's so much unlearning to do from our habits as a co-located team. So with those two elements combined, that we have hybrid teams and we're coming up on the sustainability conversation, we have a lot of work to do ahead of us.
It's so interesting you say that, because you hear everyone saying, we went remote in 1 week. We've, like it's all solved. Like it's just done now. Like if you hear people celebrating, right? We did it, right. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, okay. I think there's a bit more work to go. So, you're already won now. And you are right, because when I'm asking our audience, the HR executives that come on the show, how are you planning on, for example, managing hybrid when you have, as a leader, you have half your team remote, half in the office? How do you make sure that it's inclusive? How do you make sure that people aren't feeling like they're missing out because they're not in an office? They may miss a conversation or, whatever it may be, and they don't have the answers.
Exactly. Or they're not thinking about the answers, like how I repeated you. They're not thinking.
It was a good accent. It was a good accent. You done well.
You're very impressionable.
It's good.
They're not thinking about the answers seriously enough or intentionally enough. So they're just saying, okay, well, everyone go back to the office if that's what you want, or stay home if that's what you want, like whatever's convenient for you. And all that's doing is making the glass ceiling about 6 inches thicker, and we're regressing 50 years in terms of gender equality and racial equality and all of that. Because who's going to go back to the office? The people that have the privileges to enable that level of flexibility, the people that live in the urban areas with great commuting infrastructure, or they don't have kids at home that are still in virtual school and they don't have access to caretaking. Like all of those components that already create discrimination in the office, they're just going to blow them out of proportion even more. So we have to come at this so carefully. And that's what many companies are not doing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Those are the kind of questions I've been asking on the show over the last few months, and very little answers to those questions. We don't know, Chris.
and that's valid. I mean, we're all tired of trying to figure things out for an entire year. This was supposed to be a 2 or 3 week contingency plan. It turned into an over a year contingency plan. HR executives especially are exhausted from trying to figure out one plan after another. Yes. And the last thing they want to do right now is deep dive into this very complicated return to office strategy. But it's what we have to do in order to prevent those higher risks of sustainability from punching us in the face in a few months.
Yeah. Those other companies that you mentioned as referenced as case studies, what were some of the other challenges that they faced? You said typically it's like a year in when you start uncovering some of these challenges or the inequality. What were some of the other challenges that they faced?
Typically, what it all boils down to is management, either on the hard side or the soft side. So the hard side means that you're not updating your infrastructure, your digital tools enough to accurately report and measure productivity. So, we are so used to measuring productivity and monitoring the performance of our workforces visually. Who's in the office and who looks busy, but we all know that we can go into the office and look very productive and not be productive.
People are very good at that.
Exactly. We've been there. You've done it. I've done it. We've all done it. Right. So we all know that is a risk. So this is not a solution that is unique to remote work. It is just a solution that is really fueled and streamlined by remote work, because we don't have the option of monitoring visually. We have to monitor in other ways. And so this does not mean we turn a webcam on and watch people. We say, how are you going to prove to me that you are productive? What are the results that you're going to accomplish every week that show me that you made a good use of your time, and show me those deliverables, and make sure that you're accessible when I need to talk to you, and that you're engaged in meetings and things like that. So on the hard side, we need to update it that way and make sure that our digital infrastructure is up to snuff. But then on the other hand, the soft skills also play into that. In those historical case studies, when the organizations continued as business as usual in the office, and then half of the team or a few members of the team were not there, it created a massive out of sight, out of mind problem. And so there were hallway meetings, there was
all those organic meetings that you miss.
Exactly. There was team building, there was all of these things happening online, or I'm sorry, in the office. And then those that were online were having a completely different experience. I mean, sticking a webcam in the corner of a conference room and watching 4 other people have a meeting is not really an equal employee experience. So those are the things that we need to overcome, instead of having people continue business as usual and go back to work as usual like they did before the pandemic, and then some people just aren't there. We need to really all operate in the same way. And that's why you're hearing terms like virtual first and remote first pop up, because that is what's representing the equality of everybody operating in the same way in a location irrelevant model that equalizes employee experience, so that everybody is operating the same way regardless of their location.
I'm sure everyone listening fully agrees with what you're saying. They're probably seeing it play out already within organizations.
Yeah.
But where do people start? Where do you recommend companies start? What are the practical steps they should take?
Yeah, most of my answers to anything remote work related always boils down to communication. We just need to talk to our workforces, because this isn't just a culture conversation, right? That we're just helping people feel more connected to information. But it's actually a necessity. In office environments, we learn so much through the communication channel of observation. We can walk into a room and get a lot of sense of what's going on and who's productive.
Even subconsciously, right? Just seeing.
Exactly. Yeah. In split second, we can see what's going on. We don't have that opportunity in virtual teams. So we have to replace that communication with other communication channels. And that's why we need to be communicating more through things like Slack and Jira and Microsoft Teams, those asynchronous communication channels. We need to have meetings that are efficient and humanized. We need to be collecting feedback much more often than we are. Most of the clients that come to us, when we say, hey, have you surveyed your employees to see how they feel about remote work? They say, oh yeah, we sent a survey in April 2020.
Ago. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we probably need to see how they feel about it now. So just constant input and output of communication really helps build that awareness and replace that observation. So we know what's going on with our people, we know how they're feeling, we know what their pain points are, and helps prevent isolation. So most people think with remote work isolation that they're feeling socially isolated. And certainly that has absolutely been true during the pandemic because we've all been socially disconnected. But in traditional and normal remote work circumstances, that's usually not a problem. We don't necessarily miss sitting next to somebody, we miss having access to somebody. So the isolation that we feel in incomplete virtual infrastructures is more about informational isolation than it is social isolation.
Okay.
So when we're not updating our coworkers and letting them know what's going on, that's the problem. They just feel out of the loop. They feel isolated and alone and disconnected from what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So we need to be more intentional about that, because it's not going to happen organically because you're not in the workplace. So we need to be more intentional about making sure people feel updated on what's going on. As well. You can see that in the data as well, right? Because a lot of leaders are saying to me, "Oh, well, we can't believe the amount of attendance that we have in our all hands meetings." And I'm like, "Why are you surprised? People want to know what's going on."
Yeah, they have no idea. They're just sitting by themselves and hoping that their team members are working as hard as they are.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of distress that can be incubated from a lack of information and lack of awareness. My key phrase about all of this that I swear is going to be on my tombstone someday because I say it so often, but in remote work, over communication is just communication. We have to get more comfortable with giving and receiving more information than we're used to.
Yeah. I've had so many conversations as well where people are feeling, especially in the HR world, they're like head of comms at this point. They're writing
Constantly.
so much, it's a skill that needs to be really developed as well, because every day they're writing so much, especially as the landscape of COVID and everything else changes. There's just so much to keep abreast of and communicate with your employees.
Right. And not just in frequency, but in transparency and with empathy and just communicating in a completely different way than the emails that we're used to saying, like, okay, got it. And then, your body language does the rest of the talking next time you bump into them in the hallway. Like, that's not an option. We have to be much, much more consistent, frequent, and transparent in our communication in order to bridge that gap.
Yeah, based on what you're saying now, we're kind of getting to that point where we're a year in. What do you think the impact's going to be for companies that don't start paying attention and taking this seriously?
The risks that usually pop up first are talent and retention. So especially when people, especially in the job market that we're already headed into, this is already a risk, but people will start to look for a different remote work experience if their employers are either, number one, not willing to allow any flexibility at all, or number two, not willing to create a strong and healthy virtual culture. The talent is just going to say, see you later. I'm going to go somewhere else that will allow me to do that, because now there are options. I mean, prior to 2020, only about 3% of the workforce was on record as consistent and legal remote workers. That number is anticipated to climb to about 40% post-COVID. I mean, this is a massive increase in the way that we do business. So these opportunities were very, very rare before, and now they're not. So we are at a very high risk for losing our talent, and we need to be able to listen to them and what they want and give them what they need in order to keep them.
Mm-hmm. You are right. And I think something that's definitely happened over the last year is people have had time to think about what they really want in life, whether it's their career. Is this really aligned with my why, my purpose? Do I really want to spend the next 10 years doing this? So if you're adding that to the equation, and the fact that they can work from anywhere now and the opportunities are plenty, you're going to lose a lot of your top talent if you don't pay attention. As well. What about the impact of on managers? Because I personally have struggled, like even managing my team where half of them are in the office with me, half remotely. I feel like it's a completely new set of skills.
You're absolutely right. And that is the number one barrier to success in the sustainability of remote work, always, is the management. We talked about it a little bit before with, we need to update that digital infrastructure, but let's zoom into those soft skills a little bit and identify that the management methods that we use now as leaders are not just the habits that we've developed in our careers, they come from hundreds of years of
Yeah.
development and evolution since the Industrial Revolution. Like, I mean, this is what we were all taught in college too, right? Like,
Mm.
how do you prove to your boss that you're the most dependable employee? Well, you show up early and you're the last one to leave. Like, this is just so ingrained into how we operate, is to have those sensory experiences of, we walk by somebody's cubicle, we call them drive-bys, and like, hey, how are you doing? Good. Okay. And we walk by. Like, it's just so ingrained into what is the role of a manager, that it creates a sense of loss of control for many, many managers, that they say, well, I can't do my job in this environment. So we really have to help managers understand that your job is no longer to walk by somebody's cubicle. Let's take it back to the root of what is the purpose of that drive-by. That purpose is to check in on somebody, to do a temperature check on their mood, on their needs, to create a communication channel for them to identify where they need support. That can be done virtually. So the more that we have to unlearn and really strip back to the core and the essence of what is our role as managers, the more comfortable the transition is. But if we're so focused on what physical role we play in the office as a supervisor, that's where we get stuck and we feel very blocked.
Yeah.
So yes, management is going to need to be a very big conversation over the next several years.
You're right. You're right. It's ingrained in us. And I was saying to the team yesterday, like, I miss when I hear a deal come in on the sales floor, kind of walking over to my team and shaking their hand and saying congratulations. And I realized that that's gone away over the last year because I haven't been intentional about recreating those moments virtually as well. So that was just an example. That's something I used to really enjoy doing. I made a conscious effort to make sure people felt valued, and every time that happened, but that kind of fell to the wayside because I didn't be intentional or through technology, find the way to replicate that.
Exactly.
And that's happening on so many other levels and other occasions as well. So
yeah, you can't go up to somebody and give them that handshake, but can you still make them feel valued and celebrated about an accomplishment? Absolutely.
Yep.
You just have to think about it in a different way.
Yeah. And you have to be intentional, right? Because it's not going to present itself like I happen to overhear it. That's not, that's not going to happen anymore. Or again, that water cooler conversation where I normally say, well done on that project you delivered. It's not going to happen as well. What are the economic development implications of remote?
This is my favorite topic. This is really where my passion for the topic comes from. Yes, as a COO, I believed in and witnessed and really leveraged the corporate power of remote work to really create business benefits like higher talent retention, higher productivity, higher output. And I do sincerely believe that this is an incredible and very underutilized business strategy. However, my personal passion really comes from the socioeconomic side. This has unbelievable power to change life as we know it, both on an individual level and on a community level. So things like economic development, we've worked on incredible projects where we stimulate the economies of very rural and isolated towns and cities by taking jobs to them instead of their population needing to leave and migrate to urban areas for sustainable opportunities. So we take jobs to them and really just fuel their economy that way. We're seeing benefits for diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we can reduce the rural divide, that we can really diversify the talent pool of organizations by diversifying the talent pool of their recruiting processes and really giving them access to personas and profiles that don't exist in their region. We are seeing environmental sustainability, incredible impacts there, obviously, as we all saw during the pandemic, when suddenly nobody was driving and all of a sudden we could see the sun shining through to the big cities. Like, this is all incredible when we think about the impact of virtual jobs at scale. And then even on the micro scale, when people really take control and take responsibility for their lifestyle when they work remotely. We see incredible benefits there, like stronger home and family relationships, better cardiovascular health because they're replacing their commute with exercise. We see even healthier diets because people aren't grabbing fast food on the way to and from work, so they're making home cooked meals, and just more time and intentional relationships with loved ones because they're learning how to communicate more transparently and frequently at work, and then that carries over into their social life. Just amazing, amazing impact in so many facets of our lives that we just don't think about.
Do you think the businesses are doing enough to play their part?
Yes and no. I think a lot of it, I think that they are adopting at really impressive rates because of the pandemic. So I think in terms of adoption, that's a good start. But in terms of messaging and in terms of equipping their workforces to really understand how this can benefit their lives, how this can benefit their business, and really embracing this as an opportunity for growth, that is where I'm not seeing as much strength. They're just saying, okay, well, you work remotely now. And that's different. There is a very big difference between allowing somebody to work in a different workplace versus optimizing operations as a virtual organization. So the more that we can bridge that gap and help people really consider the broader picture of virtual organizational development, the more that we will see those socioeconomic and corporate benefits start to play out.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions I'm seeing a lot of companies now fully return to the office, which I thought was, I'm quite surprised. Now more and more global brands you know of.
Not to mention names, but just
you know of. And obviously there's a lot of rationale behind it from their side, whether it be that we're an in-office culture. You hear that sentence quite a lot. You hear them talk about, well, we are a culture that values coaching, and that knowledge exchange through people being in the office through coaching and mentoring, that doesn't work remotely. What do you say to companies that are taking that approach?
Well, I pride myself in being as neutral as possible as a consultant, right? I'm not here to say my way or the highway. I'm here to say what works best for you. So we do advise a lot of organizations that when we conduct what we call a virtual viability analysis, that is the key point of it, to say, is remote work a good option for you? Because it may not be. Maybe it's the roles that you have in your organization, the equipment that they need to use, the locations that they need to be in. Maybe it's the hesitancy of the leadership, because if you don't have leadership buy-in, it's never going to work. It's never, the adoption is going to be sabotaged from the top down. So due to a number of factors, remote work may not be a good option for you. So yeah, go ahead, go back to the office, and let's just make that the best experience possible for you, and maybe see if there's small opportunities for more flexibility so that your workers feel more listened to. But we need to make sure that those decisions are being made in a very data-driven way, as opposed to one or two or three executives just digging their heels in and saying, no, this will never amount to a thing, or no, this isn't possible for us, just because they don't want to open their mind to innovation. They don't want to have to.
Well, it's more difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, the stress of change management has not changed. This is a massive organizational change. So yeah, of course, like there is going to be definite resistance to that, but that is not the reason, or should not be the reason, to ignore the voice of your employees. It is proven that about between 70 to 86% of workers want to continue working flexibly post-pandemic. So the chances of none of your workers wanting to work flexibly post-pandemic is very, very, very low. So
zero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we just need to make sure that we're listening to them and
making
willing to open
decisions.
our minds.
Yeah.
Yep. And making the decisions for the right reasons, as opposed to we just don't want to.
100%. Do you think then, everyone had to go remote whether they liked it or not during the pandemic? Do you think then it's a good place to start then for these for companies to sit down and take that remote viability assessment. Is that what you called it? And sit down, because I can imagine most haven't actually. We've not come through it. We're kind of hopefully on the back end of getting back to whatever normal may look like now. But do you think it's a good strategy for companies to sit down and say, let's go through this assessment? Obviously, we did this because we had to, but is it the right thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely recommend having that virtual viability analysis. We also do what we call a virtual health analysis for companies that are willing to move forward in this direction. They want to, and they say, okay, yeah, we've gone remote. We love it. We're committed to it. We just need to know what's next. Like, what's the difference between what we did as a contingency plan versus that optimized virtual organizational development that we talked about. So I love that they open their minds to the fact that you just don't know what you don't know. And so they're coming to experts to say, what's next? What am I not thinking about that might pop up in 10 years or 5 years? Like, what is, introduce me to this world of virtual business, as opposed to everyone saying, oh, well, we went remote and ta-da, check, we're done. Like, it's not that simple. And it's pretty ignorant and naive to think that it would be that simple. So yeah, the virtual health analysis helps people identify what's next and maybe what has been missing from that comprehensive change management process. But yeah, either way, people need to open their mind to there's more. There's, again, what has happened? It's an international contingency plan for a global pandemic. It is not normal remote work, and it is certainly not optimized remote work. So we really need to open our mind to what you have done was great, but there's room for growth.
I love that. And that's why I was excited to have you on the show, because I think people were confusing those two. Those two things. Even a small company like ours, I'm still struggling with that. And what that looks like, because just because we moved virtually because we had to doesn't mean we've actually took the time to sit down and understand what are the process tools and how do we make it sustainable, and is it the right thing to do, and what does that look like as well. And I am surprised, I'll be honest, that there's so many of the big consulting companies all of a sudden are turning up saying we have all the answers and we're offering these solutions. You've been doing this for a long time. As well. Like, I'm no surprise that they're jumping into this space because there's tons of money, right? That are in the space. But I'm like, wait a minute. all of a sudden, you're now experts in this and you're advising companies. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, you're in this space more than I am. So.
Right. I mean, obviously that's my competition. And so I'm like, oh, man, like, come on. But at the same time, it's also scary as an advocate, not as a consultant, but as a remote work advocate. It's terrifying because I know that so many companies are leaning on these big four firms and very reputable brands to show them the way and to guide them in the right path. And they have no idea what they're doing. And it puts a lot of people and a lot of brands in a very, very dangerous place. So I wish that they were willing to listen and to grow and not have that ego that says, oh, we have all of the answers, because that we've always had all of the answers. Like, yeah, you always have had all of the answers, but not about this. So there does need to be some evolution and some innovation there, and also some consumer awareness for the market, for people that are going to these large brands and saying, help us. Are they willing to step back and take a look at the fact that these large consulting firms or large brands that they're looking to for guidance are going through the same processes?
I was just about to say that.
Right? Like they still haven't figured out their return to office.
And they're advising you.
Yeah, exactly. So they're like, well, we have no idea what we're going to do because we're totally in the dark and we're lost, but let's tell you what to do. Like, so I think we as consumers need to think very critically as well, and be willing to admit that this is a very, very young topic. So yes, everybody's learning, everybody's growing. Virtual organizational development content did not exist 4 years ago. So we need to understand that, yes, we're not going to have all of the answers that we want right now, but we still need to be very careful as we are consuming information to make sure that it is credible. There was an absolute explosion of remote work marketing content that happened in 2020. Brands that had no idea what they were talking about, just capitalizing
Because it was
on the
hot, right? Because
SEO.
it was a buzzword and yes, exactly.
Exactly.
It was
Yep.
just,
It was all about SEO. So they're just pumping out this information that doesn't mean anything. And frankly, most of the time was very wrong and very dangerous, just so they could capitalize on the traffic. So we as a consumer need to be very careful and very savvy as well.
if you was a HR director or a HR executive and you were looking for help, whether it's a company like yours or a big four, what are some of the questions they should be asking these companies?
Experience. How long have they been working remotely pre-pandemic, and or who is on their change management team that is developing this content, and what is their experience? There is a lot of really great experience. I'm not saying, this is not a blanket statement to say that every single consulting firm in the world has no idea what they're talking about. There are people with really great experience. It's just a matter of connecting the dots and making sure that the firm that you're working with or the expert that you have consulting you is connected with one of those true experts, because there's only a handful, literally less than 50 people in the entire world have the level of experience that would qualify them for this conversation. That is very rare.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we're leveraging those people and they're connected to the right resources and not just making it up as they go, because that puts them in no better of a situation than the brands that they're advising. So yeah, ask about experience and history and learnings, and make sure that those are sound and credible and data driven.
Honestly, I know it sounds pretty petty, but sometimes I want to call some people out, because like even on LinkedIn, like how many times have you seen people update their profile over the last 6 months saying helping companies go remote, or remote work expert, or remote work influencer? And I'm just like, oh, literally, come on.
We get a pretty good laugh about it, that we're like, somebody approaches us and they're like, I want to learn about remote work. And we say, oh, okay, here's some articles or, whatever, good luck on your journey. And then about 3 to 4 weeks later, it's on their LinkedIn profile, remote work expert, remote work consultant. We're like, oh gosh.
That's why I'm asking you. To be honest, when your team reached out, typically I don't invite anyone on the show, because half the time, I'll be honest, 80% of the emails that I get, or people that want to come on the show, they are those people.
Oh yeah. Everybody wants to be a remote work expert right now.
Yeah. So we have to do our due diligence internally to be like, who are the right people to have on the show? Because I don't want to spread more misinformation as well.
Well, thank you. I'm honored that
it means,
I passed.
Oh, well, no, it means a lot to have you on the show. And you're right, there aren't many people in this space, because, it hasn't been around for so long. And it seems like everyone seems to be an expert at the moment. And part of what we do for the podcast and the show is to try and spread educate our audience, right? And get through the weeds and the noise.
There's just a big difference between enthusiastic and experienced. Everybody's enthusiastic about this. Everyone's seeing the light, that this is the future and this is a great space to be in. And there's so much opportunity here for businesses and for people. And that is great. I always encourage that enthusiasm. I mean, that's the enthusiasm that we've been so hungry and desperate for so many years as advocates. But don't confuse that with experience. And especially as you are advising other people, that's a very dangerous line to cross.
Yeah. Well, listen, before I let you go, we've covered quite a lot. If there's sort of one takeaway that you want the listeners to take away with, or piece of advice, what would that be? And then where's the best place for everyone to connect with you if they want to reach out, say hello, work with you?
I think I'll boil down to that tombstone saying, right? That in remote work, over communication is just communication. Everything really can be alleviated or solved in remote work with just more communication. So write a policy and make sure that people understand and have the opportunity to mutually agree to the terms. Talk about how performance expectations change. Talk about what are their needs, how is their home office set up? Are they safe and ergonomic? And do they even have a desk? I've met literally hundreds of people that are working on cardboard boxes and beanbag chairs. we have no
Don't assume anything,
idea.
just ask
Yeah,
questions, communicate.
exactly.
Yeah.
It has to be, everything has to be communication. So communicate, communicate, communicate is always my advice. But then that extends into me too. Like I am always an advocate first, consultant second. So anybody that's listening is more than welcome to contact me directly. I love meeting new people. I love answering questions, and I love communicating with the world to help drive awareness on that topic. So they're always welcome to find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Laurel Farrer, so it's pretty easy to find me. Or you can go to our website at distributeconsulting.com, and we are more than happy to help.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us.
Thank
A lot of
you.
actionable advice, a lot to think about. And I feel like we're just at the beginning as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few years as well. But keep up the amazing work you're doing. And I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you so much for creating the space for the conversation. It's very important.
It was a pleasure. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Chris. You too. Bye.